Hey, yo guys, this is Jared, aka the Saint of Sins on Xbox Live, bringing you another edition of MLB Thoughts. And upon uploading yesterday's video, a few trades went down that pretty much shook up the landscape for a few teams. Some of the big rumblings began when word of Ryan Dempster's moving to Atlanta was all but confirmed. The story then dragged a bit for the remainder of the day as it all hinged on Dempster's approval. There was speculation as to whether Randall Delgado would be involved in the move, and by late afternoon it became clear that it was a possibility. Then came the shocking news of the Mariners dealing out Ichiro Suzuki to the New York Yankees weeks after the Mariners GM Jack Zduriencik stated he expected to keep the 38-year-old left-handed batter past the deadline. With this being a free agency year for Ichiro, Zduriencik expected to work out a deal to bring the Japanese star back for next season. A press release by Mariners CEO Howard Lincoln revealed that Ichiro had requested the trade in hopes of allowing the rebuilding franchise to grant opportunities and develop their young players. In exchange, the Mariners received back the 25-year-olds DJ Mitchell and Danny Farquhar. I could probably do an entire episode alone talking about the ills of this trade, but for now let's just leave it at this. This certainly fills the need of the Yankees, who have just lost Brett Gardner to the DL, but offensively, this muddles their lineup. Last night they utilized Suzuki in the 8-hole, an area that has been problematic in production all season long, but one can't possibly hope to utilize this slap hitter down there when he's not a strong enough on-base percentage guy. The production they're going to receive from Ichiro in this role, should it become the position the Yankees feel will best help the team, is not going to be what they actually needed. Still, this is a victory for the Bombers as they basically paid nothing for the rental. On the other hand, the Detroit Tigers made a bold move that looked to grant them what I was speaking about yesterday as they parted ways with their top prospect in Jacob Turner, along with minor leaguers Rob Brantley and Brian Flynn, in exchange for the Miami Marlins right-handed pitcher Anibal Sanchez and utility player Omar Infante. To be honest, I'm torn on this deal for some reason. On paper, it looks like a great fit for the Tigers as they receive a strong bat that can produce in their problematic fourth position. Having utilized a combination of Ramon Santiago, Ryan Rayburn, and Don Kelly, the Tigers can now look to improve second base with Infante's glove and most importantly his bat. Combined, Santiago, Rayburn, and Kelly produced 93 hits and 487 at-bats to hit a pathetic 191 average. They only managed to come around 42 times to score while driving in 36 RBIs with 4 home runs. But for some reason, I'm not convinced on Infante being the necessary bat for the team. Perhaps I'm worrying that Infante will shrink back to what he was back in his last stint in Detroit. Then I'm fearful he'll replicate his horrendous numbers from 2005 once back in a Tigers uniform. Maybe I just don't think he can hit in the American League. As for Sanchez, I'm not sold he's the right candidate for the Tigers right now, as he seems to be more of the same that the bottom end of the rotation brings. A guy that doesn't eat up a lot of innings, but has the ability to get the team some big wins. Emphasis on some. The only thing that separates him in my mind from the Smileys, Porcellos, and Scherzers is he's far more consistent. I still believe the Tigers need a stronger 2 to pitch behind Verlander, and Anibal isn't that guy. Again, I like the deal for the Tigers on paper, but something about it isn't sitting right with me. And finally, in the American League West, the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim picked up Barry Enright from Arizona for either a player to be named or cash consideration. It's not a big deal, but it's one that could help aid the issue of the back of the rotation, as Irvin Santana has been putrid all season long, Dan Herron hasn't been as sharp as he was in previous seasons, and Jerome Williams doesn't give them enough to be a playoff team. It's also a second chance at the bigs for Enright after posting a 7.41 ERA in 7 starts with the D-backs last season. Though it's a small bump for the Angels, I feel it's a positive step in the right direction for them. Plus, it's a good enough segue into my thoughts on who out west is done for and who still has hope for a playoff berth. Let's begin at the bottom, the Seattle Mariners. Though it wasn't a move they were looking to make, they ended up selling off a huge piece of their identity to continue their rebuilding process. I've long since believed that if the Mariners were going to commit to rebuilding, they had to part ways with Ichiro. For 2 years, I've been waiting to hear those magic words that the Mariners will open a trade discussion on Ichiro, but it never happened. Instead, it snuck up on me that he was simply being moved and in exchange for pieces that the Yankees weren't even interested in keeping anyway. There's still more selling in their future, but it's going to be interesting to see what goes on sale and what they get back in return. Now things get more interesting as the Oakland Athletics have been surging in the direction of bumping the Red Hot Angels. They'll likely be in the difficult position of being buyers and sellers as they look to move Bartolo Colon and maybe even Brandon McCarthy. Now I've been vocal in previous videos about Billy Beane simply because he's highly overrated by many writers, but I've got to give him credit. He won out on the Trevor Cahill deal, stealing Ryan Cook, who has been fantastic out of the pen, and the D-backs' 4th ranked pitching prospect Jarrett Parker. The Gio Gonzalez deal is looking like a push as the Nationals couldn't be happier with their top of their rotation, and the A's made out with a great find in Tommy Malone. The Andrew Bailey deal has worked in their favor tremendously as they made an absolute steal in Josh Reddick, who has become their best hitter and seems to be the spark that fires up this offense. The Yoenis Cespedes signing looked like it might take a while to pay off, but sitting in July, it's odd to see that he's encroaching upon the 300 mark with 45 RBIs and 13 home runs in only 63 games and in his first season playing in America. But here's the key question: do they have enough to surpass the better built team in the Angels for either of the 2 wildcard spots? As good as the team has been and as promising as their future is beginning to look, I have to say the answer is a resounding no. The offense doesn't have the kind of depth it needs to continue this current streak of victories. The defense is good, but doesn't give them any kind of edge over any other playoff contending team, and their pitching staff is too young and inexperienced to really handle the stress that a playoff run is going to bring down on them. But from now until the deadline, it's possible they'll look for some aid. Shortstop has been a vacuum in terms of its offense. Second base is problematic as Jamal Weeks is having a huge setback of a season. Third base is another issue offensively as Brandon Inge for years has proven that he's only capable of doing one thing with a bat: hit about 20 home runs and nothing else. Also, they have issue from their catcher, Ichrio Suzuki, who is having the worst season of his entire career, and he has only been getting progressively worse since 2009. Do I think they could potentially be upsets? I won't rule it out, but I'm not willing to place any kind of bank on them making it into the wildcard playoff. Now the team I do believe will be taking that wildcard spot, the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. They're a much better built team, and with the addition of Mike Trout, they have been able to pull the lineup together and start producing offensively. Their flaws are obvious, however. They're getting old in certain positions, have almost no depth to their bench, and are getting very little production out of the back of their rotation. Offensively right now, they're too stacked with position players that can't possibly be splitting playtime amongst themselves, namely Kendry Morales and Mark Trumbo. Since the acquisition of Albert Pujols in the offseason, they've pinched themselves into a tight corner. They were going to have to split time at third base for Morales, Trumbo, Alberto Callaspo, and Eric Ibar. Sure, that was better handled with Morales hitting as the designated hitter in most games, but his defense isn't something you want to completely squander either. Before, it was believed that the Angels would try to move either Morales or Trumbo, but it's hard to justify that now as Morales is starting to turn around and become the hitter he once was prior to his freak injury, and Trumbo has proven too valuable to this lineup to simply trade away. So instead, Callaspo and Ibar are the pieces being considered for movement in hopes of gaining some much needed depth in the outfield, as Hank Conger and Peter Borjos simply provide nothing off the bench in relief of Trout, Trumbo, and Torrey Hunter. As far as pitching is concerned, though it's likely they'll add to their bullpen, it's not necessary. Their problems stem from the 3 down in their rotation. Dan Herron is having an awful year, Jerome Williams is only mildly serviceable, and Irvin Santana, in the most polite way possible, could be best described as putrid. This isn't a team that was realistically going to be looking at the Dempsters, Cole Hamels, or Zach Greinke's. Instead, they would best focus on pitchers that could fit their needs best at a reasonable price. Someone like a Paul Maholm, a Brian Mattis, a Francisco Liriano, maybe even a Randy Wolf. Guys that can go long and will pull together much needed quality starts at the back end of the rotation. To me, I think the best fit for them would be Brian Mattis. He's had a lot of pressure pitching in the tougher AL East, was always at the top of the rotation to face off against stronger pitchers than him, is in need of new scenery to possibly turn him around, provide some depth to their pitching as another lefty arm, is young and controllable, will be cheap to gain in trade and cheaper to maintain on contracts, can still be fixed with the right pitching coach, and above all else, could use a stronger defensive team and more pitcher-friendly ballpark behind him. As they stand now, the Angels are in a very good position for the wild card, or even a possible stab at upsetting the best team in baseball for the AL West Division pennant, the Texas Rangers. Now, some may argue that because the Yankees have a better record, that automatically means they're the better team. But to me, the Rangers have an all-around stronger cast of players to give them the kind of depth that makes them almost impossible to beat. What could possibly stunt them is the latest injury to Colby Lewis, who is stated to miss the rest of the season with his torn ligament. That's a big enough setback that now the Rangers will be in the market for a starting pitcher, something they weren't in real need of as Neftali Feliz was slated to return before the end of the month, giving them back a strong rotation that had the hiccup of finding space for Roy Oswalt. Offensively, the team is stacked with serviceable bats and a strong bench presence. The weakest link offensively is arguably the catcher position, as Mike Napoli is hitting under 240 with less than 40 RBIs. Yorvi Torrealba doesn't fare much better, being the backup, but it's not a breaking deal for the team as they have plenty of offensive production coming out of everyone else. The bullpen is another strong point for the team as they rank 9th in ERA, 11th in batting average against, and 1st in WHIP. There isn't a big need here, but it's likely they'll try and stay competitive in bidding wars for mid-relief arms such as Jonathan Broxton. I think there might be better fits for the team, such as the Cubs right-handed pitcher Sean Camp. And with that said, this wraps up my thoughts on the American League playoff battles. The Yankees will take the East with a tight race down the stretch for one of the wildcard spots between the Orioles and the Rays. I'm liking the chances of the White Sox to take the Central, but I'm open to the Tigers giving them good enough fits. And the West belongs to the Rangers, with the Angels battling for the second wildcard spot. That's going to do it for this edition of MLB Thoughts. I will see you guys later. Peace.